Welcome everybody to the Dr. H Fantasy Show, Week 4 Weekend Edition. We've got a great show planned for you, including a huge interview at the end of the show. But first, we're going to start talking waiver pickups, and eventually, we're going to answer a question from the faithful fans. Let's start with the waiver pickups. Week 4, shall we? Reggie Wayne, Plaxico Burress, Marvin Harrison, Calvin Johnson, Roy Williams, Amani Toomer, just to name a few that are facing the dreaded bye week this week. But I've got a suggestion for you. Why don't you try looking into the waiver wire for Isaac Bruce? I know he's ancient, I know he's old, but he does have some chemistry with Mr. JT O'Sullivan. Although he only had 2 catches for 19 yards last Sunday against the Lions, he did catch a touchdown. After hauling in 0 catches in Week 1, Bruce had a strong outing in Week 2, catching 4 passes for 153 yards. With JT O'Sullivan emerging as a decent fantasy quarterback right now, Bruce could be an option at wide receiver this week and a viable fill-in and option down the stretch. Going now over to the running backs on bye, Julius Jones, Joe Adai, Brandon Jacobs, Kevin Smith, Rudy Johnson, and the Patriots' 3-headed human poop factory. Here's my suggestion for you. It might sound crazy, but Michael Pittman of the Denver Broncos, the awful, horrendous, smelly Chiefs rushing defense has given up a combined 500 yards over the past 2 weeks combined. Although Pittman's role is limited to strictly goal line carries, this one has blowout written all over it. And to go along with a possible 1 or 2 1-yard touchdown dives for Michael Pittman, he could also be in for a few extra garbage time carries down the stretch. Start Michael Pittman if you have any of these other guys on bye and hope for at least a touchdown and maybe even some 50 to 60 extra garbage time yards. Hey, you can do a lot worse than 10 points this week. Moving on to our final position, tight ends on bye. We've got John Carlson in Seattle, Dallas Clark in Indianapolis. Some of you might even be worried about Kevin Boss being on bye. I doubt it, but you never know. And also not to mention the injured Jeremy Shockey. Well, I've got a big selection for you. And by big, I mean physically big. Robert Royal, the other Royal. I know Eddie Royal's taken a lot of fame this year, but there's another Royal starting to stand out, a 6-year veteran. The Rams have played repulsively against the pass, yielding the most fantasy points to all receivers. Royal's mammoth size will present a mismatch for St. Louis's pussy linebackers. Averaging 4.3 targets per contest, the 6-year freight train has seen an expanded role in the Bills' conservative offense. Trent Edwards has even been quoted as saying, "Robert understands the offense. He understands his role in the offense. I hope we can get him the ball more. He's going to be huge in opening up our receivers and opening up our run game a little bit. We're going to need to get him the ball." That right there is fantasy gold. Based on the very friendly matchup, Robert Royal could also strike gold this week. I think he crosses the goal line chalk. Now that's going to do it for our waiver advice for this week. Moving along though, I got a lot of great emails and text this week alone. But my favorite, okay, I lied, I just pulled it out of a hat, came from Jethro Williams in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Jethro? Hi, Dr. H. Long-time listener, first-time caller. I want to know if Peyton Manning is ever going to be worth the first-round pick I spent on him in the draft. When do I begin to bench him in favor of my backup, Trent Edwards? What do you think, Dr. H? Well, Jethro, you're mad right now. I can tell, and for good reason. Watching Peyton's return to Happy Feet dancing might be making you hotter than a half-fucked fox in a forest fire, but it isn't all his fault. He's missing some key ingredients of his offensive soup, and the best way to get the passing game going again starts with a solid running game. The Colts' running game thus far is not solid. It's a bad case of diarrhea, the kind of diarrhea that literally sounds like you're taking a pee out of your butthole. But I truly think Tony Hugo's eventual return and Peyton's knee getting stronger every day, thus allowing them to run their bread and butter stretch play, will steadily boost Peyton's value. Throw in the fact that he missed all of the preseason and is just now starting to get back in sync with Reggie, Marvin, and Dallas, and it is a solid equation for future success. Was he worth the first-round pick you spent on him? Absolutely not. But you used a very high value on him, and selling him low right now will not solve any of your problems, Jethro. Start Trent Edwards this week in a very favorable matchup while Peyton is on bye, but return Peyton to your starting lineup next week and until further notice from Dr. H. How's that do for you, Jethro? Well, thank you, Dr. H. I'm going to go pick up Trent. I think he's out there on my waiver wire. Okay, Jethro, we'll talk to you in the future. Thanks, Dr. H. All right. Well, that's what you got for me so far. We've already covered the waiver wire, and we've already gone into one of our questions from our faithful listeners. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, pause for a moment of station identification, and when we come back, just like I told you, boys, a very, very big deal special guest. This is Dr. H. This is Dr. H's Fantasy Show. We'll see you after a brief bit. You are listening to 95.5 KFFL, The Ass. Dr. H will be back in a brief bit. And don't forget to join us on Tuesday nights at 7 o'clock for Dr. H's Weekend Rewind. Welcome back, the Dr. H Fantasy Prediction Show. This week, though, like we've already done, if in case you're just now tuning in, we've gone over some waiver wire potential pickups. We've answered a question, and like I promised, with no further ado, two very special guests are on hand with us today. Joining us on the Pepto-Bismol hotline, Peyton Manning and his brother Eli Manning. Now, guys, I've always been wondering something. Last year, on the very first week, you guys faced up against each other. Peyton, we'll start with you. What was going through your head, and what were some of the pressures internally within your family?
Well, we knew the Colts and the Giants were on the schedule, and had a feeling the game was going to be pretty early in the season. But of course, when it was opening night of NBC, that certainly added to the hoopla, and of course the questions had already started. Well, who are your parents going to go for? What are they going to wear? And every question you can imagine. But I think Eli and I are going to try to have fun with it. It's like I think both of us would like to see our teams 1-0 after the first game, but that's obviously not possible right now. I think Eli and I look forward to the actual kickoff of the game.
Let's get the game going. It's going to be a lot of questions, a lot of things you have to deal with. That's not really as fun or things you want to deal with. We want to play the game, go in there, and that's what it's all about. And being the first game, you have to go through training camp and everything and dealing with these questions. But again, we're going to try to have fun with it and just look forward to going in there and trying to find a way to win and have some fun.
Oh, that must have been very awkward. Needless to say, after the game, a very awkward situation for all of you and your family. But let me get to something. We're a little pushed on time here. But quickly, I've heard something. I know I've heard something one of you mentioned earlier about something in the offseason. Robert Mathis, Freeney, OCU Manura, and Strahan, I believe. And both of you, it's you two versus the rest of them. Playing some type of flatulence game where I guess the point of the game is to fart on the other opponent, and sharts are awarded extra points. Could you tell me a little bit about this farting game you guys all play?
But Eli and I have kind of been joking. He and I aren't really worried about each other.
Freeney's my concern.
I'm worried about Strahan. Freeney and Mathis, Strahan, and OCU Manura. Believe me, I think Eli and I wish that each of us was playing defense.
Wow, you guys are some couple of sick fuckers. Anyways, thank you, Eli. Thank you, Peyton, for coming on the Dr. H Show. We all enjoyed talking with you. We'll do it again sometime soon. I'm sorry to cut you off so soon, but we've got to get out of here. My producer, Jonathan's already telling me to hurry things up. This has been Dr. H, Fantasy Special for the week. Week number 4, Weekend Edition. We look forward to seeing you again in week number 5. Until then, gentlemen, this is Dr. H.